Path of Exile 2 has been in the news a lot. Path of Exile 2 does what Blizzard weren't allowed to. Don't know what that means. Make a good game? Were they? Seems like they weren't allowed to make a good game.
Talk about one of the biggest launches of the year, of course, Path of Exile 2, and how it's doing what Diablo 4 did not. And I bring that up as an angle not to bash Blizzard, right? That's not really the point. The point is that products cannot escape how they were made, or in this case, how they were shipped. Path of Exile 2 is a game that is getting so much right. It's managed to sidestep so much of what torpedoed Diablo 4's at least initial online sentiment, and when we go into the detail of the creation of these games, it gets even better. So this is a big one, an important one, and one that we're going to put in context, of course supported by today's sponsor. We're going to help you transform doom scrolling into skills you can be proud of, and for me,
I do not like Bellular News' sponsors.
Something you won't regret. But first, we got to check in with the numbers. They are mighty. This is a hell of a success. So, Steam peaked with 578k players, placing this in the all-time top 20. It also beat Path of Exile 1's highest ever concurrency, which was 350k in July 2024. So yeah, old game, but no slouch. And of course, it's not even free to play yet. All of this represents at least $30 of revenue. So yes, this is a lot of money for the company.
I was lied to. All of my friends told me that it was going to be free to play when it launches. It was not. It was $30, and guess what? I don't have $30 to afford this game, so I gotta wait until it's free to play, and nobody knows when that's gonna be. Hopefully soon. But when that finally releases on free to play, it's gonna be a cultural phenomenon.
And through the weekend, it of course was topping Steam's bestseller list. But it's not only selling in Steam. As an example, my PC, well, it must have got access to my Twitter feed because my PC rapidly unalived itself, so I've been playing on PS5. It actually hit rank 6 on the PlayStation and Xbox stores, and much like Diablo 4, my god, this game feels amazing to play on the controller. It's incredible.
It looks amazing to play. I bet it feels amazing on the keyboard and mouse too. I use a lame-ass controller. What you mean?
Now, the launch was good and not good, but for good reason. Grinding Gear reached 1 million early access redemptions. Yeah, redemptions, there's a few little asterisks there that I'll get into later. They hit that before the launch, and they knew the servers would be a problem. They actually had way more success than they thought, than they forecasted, which is almost surprising to me. It just seems like this was inevitably going to be a humongous event. I guess they modeled for humongous and got double humongous. Anyway, the servers were completely rammed. A last-minute crash that hit the majority of users was found, so they delayed the launch, but eventually, the game came out, and just about all was well. Over on Twitch, well over 1 million people were watching, and even SteamDB broke. And that's pretty well, because it was literally just people checking how the launch was doing. Let's talk about numbers and money, though. This is a little bit of bro math, but it actually does have a point. Path of Exile 2 is pulling higher than Helldivers 2 in terms of its concurrence on Steam. And whenever it's dipping down into the troughs, it still is over 200k. It's doing incredibly.
I'll be honest with you, I played Helldivers 2 for like maybe an hour in total. Maybe I should pick it up. There's so many games right now that are awesome that I missed out on that I could totally try right now. Just, I'm playing other games. There's so many games. I've missed so many old games, and I want to run through all the Resident Evil games. Still wanting to play the new No Man's Sky. Damn it, it's too much.
Now, even, yeah, you look at Helldivers 2's launch, it's got its strange server problems that make the chart look really quite funny, but the point is, both are selling extremely well, and there are similar launch spikes. Now, Path of Exile 2 beat Helldivers 2 to the 1 million mark, because it hit 1 million access codes redeemed before launch. Helldivers 2 took 3 days to hit 1 million sales. 6 weeks post-launch, Bloomberg reported 8 million Helldivers 2 sales, and by 12 weeks, we got a number of 12 million Helldivers 2 sales, with about 60% being in PC. Now, I don't think Path of Exile 2 will overall hit as broadly as Helldivers did, but I actually do bring it up for
60% being on PC. That is a problem for Sony, because Sony wanted people to be using their system, and then when they were locking everybody out unless they had a PlayStation account, 60% of people were upset.
Really for a reason here, for a point. Helldivers 2 was a surprise. That's why it was such a viral, word of mouth hit. And in many ways with Path of Exile 2, it's achieving the same. Grinding Gear Games had expectations for this. Those expectations were probably modeled off how many people were playing Path of Exile 1, right? But what we've seen is viral word of mouth carrying Path of Exile 2. And that's because, well, it's actually managed to do something that is altogether more ambitious, risky, and impressive. We live in a world where many games don't earn their marketing copy. Path of Exile 2 does, so it's billed as a next-generation ARPG. And it really is. See, here's the thing. I've realized I actually don't like ARPGs in the traditional sense. Once the sugar rush ends, I am just incapable of caring. The gear doesn't work for me. But Path of Exile 2 actually does click. Another one that clicked for me is No Rest for the Wicked. Both are refreshingly different action RPGs, and that's what Grinding Gear seems to have pulled off. And it's why I brought up Helldivers, because it was a big surprise, right? That's why it sold so much better than Arrowhead, even like optimistically modeled. So whenever you hear a game being billed as, you know, this is the Skyrim of that, or the Dark Souls of this, you often roll your eyes and think, oh, really? That's the... But no, in this case, actually, kind of is like that. Path of Exile 2 is slower, it's more methodical, it's got a dodge roll, and a dodge roll that feels pretty damn good. And that's allowed Grinding Gear to design the combat.
I've heard a lot of, this is the Dark Souls of ARPGs, or the Dark Souls version of Diablo.
Differently. It's slower, it's harder, it actually feels way more engaging and involved to me than just a big numbers go brr. You know, the actual feeling of skill and mastery is really there. That's why I'm continuing to play it. It's why I liked the bit of No Rest for the Wicked that I played. And most importantly for today...
I haven't played No Rest for the Wicked, and I am an ARPG fan. I've played a lot of Torchlight and Torchlight 2. Torchlight 3 was garbage. Get that out of here. But, what other... I've played some other ARPGs. Oh, Hades? Hades is good.
It's not what people tend to expect from the ARPG genre, and I've got to wonder if that positive word of mouth, people saying, yeah, this is an ARPG, but it's actually different, it's trying more, the boss fights are actually worth doing just for being good boss fights in a game. That is a type of word of mouth, and being ambitious with the design of this game that actually seems to be moving the needle and making this hit harder than Grinding Gear even expected. And when we look at both it and Diablo 4 and try to learn lessons, it actually gets more interesting. Both are games that are basically channeling a hell of a lot of Diablo 2, and they are...
I mean, and this is just when it launches in early access. They're gonna be adding so much more stuff to it, and it's still gonna be a free game.
Both games that try to slow the pace.
Imagine a game going free to play, and then they add more stuff.
Way down and amp up the meaning. That's what D4 tried to do with its launch. But, well, it didn't really work that well. Now, there are many parts of D4 that I think are pretty excellent, but it didn't really land its design. And post-launch, it's basically succeeded by turning itself into a far more fast-paced game, essentially borrowing lessons from Diablo 3, which means that, yeah, there is a new Diablo game to play, but it's not really one that's daring, that's next generation, right? Whereas here, Path of Exile 2, it has also tried to be a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical, but it's actually managed to stick the landing and succeed, and that is a humongous achievement. And in the biggest picture, that's because, let's just say you're somebody who...
I can tell what's going on. I can keep track of everything just watching it. If I'm watching somebody play Diablo 4, just me watching it, not playing, I can't tell what's going on. I can tell a little bit more what's going on when I'm playing Diablo 4, but you still can't really.
Loved Elden Ring, and tens of millions of people are in that category. Well, Diablo 4 would have very little to offer you. They do not play any way similar. Path of Exile 2 can credibly target that market and get non-ARPG grinders in. And that means that this could truly expand the genre. I don't want to shock you, but expectations sort of do matter. And while expectations for this were high, it was also well built to handle things not being perfect. Diablo 4 launched at a big full premium price, with, of course, a premium early access on top of that. And that meant that players were rightly scathing whenever things just did not feel that well thought out. PoE 2, though, is overtly an early access game, right? That's the whole point. And the core of it kind of just goes like this. The world is rich. Big Diablo 2 vibes. It's immersive. It's dense. The gameplay is absolutely outstanding. The bosses are refreshingly outstanding for the genre, unlike, say, Diablo 4, where a lot of people were kind of disappointed by that. And then, of course, there's Path of Exile's home turf, Buildcraft. Frankly, it terrifies me. It's nearly limitless, but it's that in a way that's all about the player, freedom, and expression. Just looking at clips, looking at GIFs on Twitter, the amount of cool shit that people are building is genuinely kind of inspiring. However, it does share one thing with Diablo 4, and that is not a lot of praise for loot. For now, what I understand is basically whenever you level up, the vendors will refresh, and actually quite often you'll be getting your better sources of gear from those vendors, at least in the earlier level up flow. And it's kind of funny because D4 got loot wrong with launch. But, right, the thing that matters here the most is the core gameplay and the buildcraft, and those absolutely seem to be outweighing the loot concerns. Plus, it's early access. That means players have got reasonable expectations. Right now, the game has got half of its campaign. You basically complete it again in hard mode.
You say half. You say half. But what the actual ending is in that half too, and all of the added stuff, and then they're gonna add more stuff after that. It's not like that's gonna be the end. There's still gonna be more stuff.
Mode, and then you're into the end game. And it's even funny the way that happened, because Path of Exile 2 initially started off in 2019 as a new campaign for Path of Exile. Basically, things escalated and now we're here. And by the time they hit 2024, they realized something. Well, we shouldn't do the rest of the campaign right now. We need to do a launch with a full-ass endgame. And that's exactly what they did. Here's a quote from them. This is them talking about their recent development. Part of what we're trying to do with early access is get the game right, and I think that if we had scaled endgame down, then we wouldn't really be getting the true reflection of what the game would be.
That was a big miss whenever I was playing Diablo 4 at launch, because I was part of the Season 0 crowd. And we got to the end game pretty quick because I played with a bunch of friends, and we ran through stuff, man. And once we got to the end, there was just nothing to do but grind the same types of dungeons over and over and over again. And everything was broken all the time. And they'd fix stuff and then add stuff and everything else would break. It was a bad time. And then Season 1 was a disappointment. And then it just broke for me. I could never get it installed on my computer again because I run Linux. So getting stuff to run is hard sometimes.
And that, folks, is the kicker, the big thing. Diablo 4 did not have any of that, and I again do not say this to bash Blizzard developers. Seriously, I don't. Most people are good and want to do good, and as developers, they would have killed for a launch like Path of Exile 2, one that had reasonably set expectations, that wasn't asking for so much money even though core parts of the game were kind of ill thought out, one that's basically designed to make the game over time as best as it can be for their players with their players. And even sticking within ARPGs, we have another success story from this year and last epoch. It did just that. But for the biggest picture, we need to look at another game that's similar in a way, and that's Baldur's Gate 3. Obviously, totally different games, but it released with just a
it's got a lot of the same vibes to it, too.
Fraction of its content in early access, and that gave Larian the finances, feedback, and the time that they needed to make what is easily one of the world's best ever role-playing games. And why? Well, because that was slowly made with their community over time. And that is exactly what Grinding Gear have set themselves up to do here. Of course, like Larian, their one thing, the literal mission of the company is AR.
I hope that AAA companies don't start doing this, start releasing partial games, and then later you end up having to rebuy it to get the rest of the game. That would suck. That's not good. Not a good thing. It's great that these games ended up winning and being successful at it, but I don't want AAA companies to be catching on, so stop doing that.
RPGs. And that gets me to the real point. Larian and Grinding Gear had experience and control. What did Blizzard Entertainment have? They had scale, chaos, pressure, and misery. So whenever I say that you should care about how your games are made, this is why. because we want them to actually be good. Diablo 4 is a really strange project. It started off as an over-the-shoulder action game, then it was rebooted, and then all spare resources were poured into finishing the damn thing, all of course to hit its big release target. And from the CEO's vantage point, it of course worked. D4 was an astounding success, one of the games of all time, the fastest selling Blizzard game in history, 12 million players within 2 months. And of those millions, how many purchased the far more expensive early access edition? Probably quite a few. I mean, within 6 days, it generated $666 million of revenue, and that, folks, is stonks. Leaks suggest $1 billion in revenue by September 2024, with $150 million coming from microtransactions up to that point. Yet, through a lot of that time span, the players were not happy. Even though those amazing numbers were there, the game was clearly not ready. Core systems did not stand to reason. Their foundational gameplay hypothesis of an open world full of objectives that you would basically re-clear every season was almost immediately proven.
Yeah, they sold. It sold, but it's not going to be a cultural phenomenon, and it's not going to live throughout the years with good faith. People are going to look back on Diablo 4 and laugh because Path of Exile 2 just wiped the slate clean with them. Like, they're gone. They're off of my... I'm not going to be playing Diablo over Path of Exile. There's no way. I don't see how they're going to get me back into Diablo.
To be wrong and boring. I mean, basically it was saying, would you like the structure of an Ubisoft game and every season you can clear the map again? No, obviously that was never going to work. Fundamental aspects of itemization were broken. Now, credit where it's due. The Diablo 4 team have actually busted their asses to fix as many parts of that game as they could. But the point is, they could have delayed that game, and we could have got a Diablo 4 that was substantially better, and that dodged so many of those player concerns. But we didn't get that. Again, $666 million of revenue in 6 days.
They had to get it out because their company was on fire. I remember what it was like, especially with Diablo Immortal. When they started talking about Diablo Immortal. Well, do you guys not have phones? And they didn't talk about Diablo 4. Then they were like, oh crap, we gotta release this game or we're gonna die. We won't be a company no more, because people weren't playing World of Warcraft. I think it was the worst launch for World of Warcraft they'd ever seen at that point. When Diablo Immortal was around, it was the Dragonflight one. Was it that one? Saw a lot of marketing for it. Don't know anybody who actually jumped back into World of Warcraft to play it.
They obviously needed to ship it when they were going to ship it, and with a scale like that, the dev team are not the people who are making the calls. They're not calling the shots. This game, Path of Exile 2, is early access. Right now, it costs under half the price of D4's base edition. And on top of that, many longtime Path of Exile players got it for free. And the way that worked is pretty neat. If you've ever purchased a top edition supporter pack, or if you've spent over the lifetime of your account $480, you get access to it. This matters. That is actually goodwill. That is money from some of their players with the deepest pockets that they just sort of said, nah, we'll just give it to you. Keep on playing Path of Exile. They've also ensured that they're not like killing PoE 1. PoE 1 was amazingly supported for years and years and years and years, building up goodwill. Meanwhile, with Blizzard, what happened? Well, Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls was, kind of killed in the grave. They sort of abandoned expansions when they actually could have got lots of success there. The point isn't that one team is perfect and the other one makes nothing but mistakes. No, in both cases, you've got developers who will make mistakes and will want to learn from their launch. With Diablo 4, it is a humongously staffed behemoth that is rigid, hard to move, and is not under that team's explicit control. With Path of Exile, they've overtly planned for open development. Now, sure, the network team may have needed some crisis meetings, and yeah, we're seeing totally busted combos being nerfed, but nothing close to the, oh dear, our foundational design hypothesis that we basically didn't beta test at all appears to be wrong and the players are not happy. which is what would have happened inside Blizzard, and must have stung. And that's the power of designing for early access. No rushing to hit the quarterly earnings, quite the opposite. PoE 2 was in fact delayed. See a lot of that account stuff, cross, like microtransactions and everything? Well, the game was delayed because they basically had to re-architect all of their server and account stuff to make that work because, yeah, there's like shared microtransactions. And the games are going to be running concurrently as well.
The way that skeleton moves is just cool, man. I don't remember anything looking that cool in Diablo 4. Everything kind of just had this blobby, cartoonish look.
Gear know the PoE 2 is different in a way that some people will not like. That actually means that PoE 2 has a reason to exist, unlike a certain other sequel from a certain other company that's probably in both of our minds right now. But that's not the final point. We're going to have to talk about scale because the numbers here, I don't want to say they're shocking, but my god, do they prove a point. If you go onto LinkedIn right now, you will see that Grinding Gear Games have got between 51 and 200 employees. Quickly Googling around, I've seen it being reported as like 140, 150, and I'm sure there will be more people in the credits, like outsourcing and stuff. But that's a fraction of the Diablo team. In fact, right, I have it from sources as of last year that Diablo was the single largest game team at Blizzard Entertainment. And at one point, I know World of Warcraft, in and around that time, was about 550 people. So you likely had north of 600 as the core dev team of Diablo 4. And that comes out as a bit of a troubled project, even though it sells a lot, makes money up front. We then look at this game, a game that is not burdened by having to find work for 600 to 1,000 people to do. Because, what the hell? How are you going to make a game that way that's actually good and crafted?
That's a lot of money to be paying yearly, man, for salaries and stuff. How do they sustain that? That is so much. That's why they have so many microtransactions. That's why they're selling skins for $10 in there.
Okay, I'm going to play a lot more Path of Exile. We will keep you up to date in this story because it's one of the good ones. And sticking with good ones, watch this next. It's really fun. It's basically GOG giving a big slap back to Blizzard and winning so much free PR. I think you'll find.
I like that one. I watched that one yesterday, actually. It was a good one. Path of Exile 2 is already a cultural phenomenon. I can't wait for it to be free to play. That'd be amazing. I'm going to be playing it, and I know a lot of people are going to be playing it. It's going to be so good. It's going to be so good, man.